First up, teleporting here, he is a former Harvard instructor of risk communication and risk psychology and author of How Risky Is It Really? Can you guess why we booked him? David Ropeik. Okay. Thank you so much. David, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, you are.
Disappointed that I'm not there so that I could not shake hands with you in person. But
you know what?
Stay.
I want to tell people you were perfectly fine with getting on the plane. Yeah. We said, you know what? We've done satellite before. Maybe this is a good time to do it, to set an example. But tell me first about that. Like, you're the guy. This is why I wanted to have you on tonight, because the title of your book is so perfect. How risky is it? Getting on a plane, how risky is it?
The air doesn't transport this stuff, so it's just surfaces that you touch, and you touch them in the airports, so the flying out isn't any different than that. But we hear about, oh, people aren't flying, and that feeds our kind of emotional relationship to risk. It's a perfect example of what this whole conversation, I hope, will be about. You said perfectly in your monologue, quote you, we don't do smart stuff in this country. When there's a risk around, we don't do smart stuff. We don't use the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of our brain.
Don't touch your head.
Yeah, right. Wait. By the way, I've been introduced a lot of times, and this is the first time there was a reference to oral sex in the Oval Office in the introduction lead-in to me. Thank you. No. The serious point is, and coronavirus is a great teaching moment for this. We are hardwired to use our emotions more than reason all the time, but especially when it comes to keeping ourselves safe. So what happens is we get 1 or 2 or 3 quick facts, and we have to do this quick in case the threat is like right there, right? And then we run them through a lot of subconscious emotional filters. Our personal circumstances, are we healthy, are we old, our age, our gender, all those things, and a set of instincts that we all share that make some risks feel scarier and some risks feel less scarier. So imagine like a bunch of stained glass windows, right? So we're here, we have a few facts, we're looking through all this dark color, right? And from that, we're supposed to be objective on the other side with statistics and evidence. It's not how we do it. We end up, as a result, being more afraid than we need to, like now, or sometimes less afraid than we should be, like with influenza.
But Doc, you know, the stained glass window is a bad analogy because a lot of people look at that and think that's the answer.
And they pray. And they pray for exactly, hang a second, they pray, a lot of people suggest about religion, for exactly this psychology. So one of the things that coronavirus is scary about is that it's new. Everybody says, yeah, it's new, it's scary. Why is that scary? New as a new cell phone is not scary. New is not knowing. And not knowing means we don't know what we need to know to protect ourselves.
And not seeing. Isn't that it? We don't know about it, and we can't quite see it.
And we can't quite control our own safety because we don't know how to keep ourselves safe.
No.
Talk about seeing. It's like driving down the road, if you can get going at any speed in Los Angeles, and your eyes are closed. That's scary, right? So we turn, in fact, to religion and many other things, masks, toilet paper, they're all the same. For a sense of control, when we don't have personal control, we look for it in other ways.
Wait, masks and toilet paper are the same?
Yeah, and sorry,
I'm
church.
glad I don't live with you,
and
Doc.
Islam, right, yeah, right. But you get it, right?
You know, whenever I hear about this kind of stuff, I always think of my little dog, Chico, because, you know, he loves to eat the end of my cereal in the bowl and when I put it down. But if I leave the spoon in the bowl, that is a risk he will not take. He loves that cereal, but he will not go near the bowl if there's a fucking spoon in it. Yet when I pull in the driveway, he runs right in front of the car.
2 words.
People and dogs are not good at assessing risk. That's your, right?
Yeah. Well, dogs, I've had several dogs. They're awesome. They're great teachers about this because they're totally in the moment. They're taking the cues from absolutely only the evidence in front of them, not yesterday, not tomorrow, not all these characteristics that make risk feel
like
scary or less like control. Well, yeah.
Okay, so, you know, the panic, I feel, is making things worse than the actual disease. What? I see you gesturing.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. Two things. First of all, panic is when the zombies are attacking us or the wrong person gets elected, right? Panic is society run amok. We're not panicking when we buy toilet paper. It may look silly. We're not doing smart things, like you said, but we're looking for a sense of control, and that's instinctive precaution. It doesn't match the facts. That's what I'm saying. This whole conversation is our fears are what we're going on, not just the evidence alone. But we're not panicking, But what we are doing when we overreact is sometimes we're creating other risks. So let me be very specific here. There are people who are more worried about this than they need to be, and that worry suppresses their immune system and makes them more vulnerable to getting the thing they're worried about.
Yep, yeah. If you lose sleep, if you have stress, those are terrible factors
Exactly.
for your immune system. Yeah.
Exactly.
The only analogy I could think about this time is when AIDS hit, which is not exactly analogous, but people were panicked. And I do remember a period when we didn't know much about it, and people thought, they were saying, maybe it could go airborne. And that made people freak out. Yes,
Exactly. It was the not knowing. You said it again. And the not knowing leaves us feeling like, I don't know how to protect myself. I was putting the mic on for this, and I was telling the guy in the studio that when I was a reporter in Boston in the 80s, I worked for a union, and they wouldn't let me touch any of the gear until it was time to mic up an AIDS patient. And they were scared. So I did the miking up because I wasn't. When you don't know what you need to know to protect yourself, you're more afraid. But if I may, to broaden the conversation, that's only one of these several characteristics that make us more or less afraid. We're more afraid of man-made risks than natural risks. We're more afraid of a risk that's now than later. That's climate change. That's why we're not as afraid as we should be of climate change, right? This language of risk perception psychology that I wrote about and that we're talking about, this is just one example.
So I feel like our general posture as a nation has become one of fragile people. If we were a hardier people who weren't afraid of everything to begin with, kids can't walk to school on their own like they did when I was a kid. I mean, kids cannot be left alone. That's a free-range child. That's verboten these days. I feel like we would be in a better place to handle this because we're already so anxious about stuff that we shouldn't be anxious about. Don't you think that's a part of it?
It is a part of it, and it's called in the scientific literature the social amplification of risk, which basically means that how we hear about things, which aren't always perfectly factual and accurate, and they go through our feelings, lead us to perceive that risk in ways where we do other things that are bad to us, like teaching our kids that it's a scary world with drills in school that you're going to be shot, the statistical risk of which is infinitesimal. The messages that we're sending each other that crime is bad here and, oh my God, the sky is falling in every which way, like coronavirus is now, make no mistake, the risk is real and serious, and we should acknowledge that, feeds a general sense of what George Gerbner at the University of Pennsylvania, who passed away, used to call the mean world syndrome. If all we hear about is that the sky is falling, we walk around ducking.
What did he pass away from?
Being old, I think.
Not important, Doc. Not important. Let me ask you one last question. I brought this up last week, and I hope it's somewhat true, which is that I feel like they being the authorities, so we don't know quite exactly who's doing the talking, but the information we get, tend to, when there's a crisis lurching, they tend to tell us it's going to be worse, so that when it's not as bad, we go, oh, good, that wasn't as bad. It's better to be pleasantly surprised, The examples I gave were Y2K was going to be horrible at the turn of the century. And then there was the BP oil spill, which was going to be horrible, and the fires of Kuwait. Remember, after the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein lit all the oil wells on fire in Kuwait, and that was going to be years in the making, and it was 8 months before they put it out. Do you think that's the same thing here? They're telling us it's going to be worse so that when it's not as bad, we're pleasantly surprised?
It's part of it, but there are two sides of it. So let me start on the other side first and get back to your side. A lot of people in power don't like the fact that people are more afraid than they need to be and are what you called panicking. buying toilet paper, right? They try to control that with the don't panic message. God, how many times have we heard that from all the people at the very top? Well, you don't hear it from the reasonable people at the CDC. You don't hear it from the reasonable people at the WHO. They understand the importance of respecting our feelings, not trying to control them and telling people, hey, you should feel like I want you to feel, which sounds like I want you to feel like that so you can go buy stocks and be happy and I won't take any grief for this. It's disrespectful to tell people how they feel. The health people don't do that, but what they do is what you said. There's worse coming, and there is. That's a way to put things in perspective now when they get worse so they won't freak us out even more.
Right.
And this talk about this is like the normal flu, that's not comparing the two diseases, they're different. But it is a way of saying, let's put in perspective that we've lived through something like this before so it doesn't feel as new, which makes it feel scarier.
Okay, thank you. You put a lot in perspective. I appreciate that.
You're
Stop
welcome.
touching your head. Thank you, David, and let's meet our panel.